Sorry, I have no idea what went wrong.
There we go. Okay, let me. Okay, and I just have to get my screen going here.
There we go.
Okay. If everyone wouldn't mind muting themselves, and we'll get started here. We'll unmute, obviously, panelists. You get to unmute in a minute when we get to you. So welcome, everybody. This is the February 2022 5 Miles from Anywhere International Sherlock Holmes Society meeting. This is we've been going over for about 1.5 years now. It's been great, and we're going to keep it going. So we meet every first Saturday of the month at this time. So, and we call ourselves international because we have an international group here, and it's great. And I really enjoy these talks, and today I think it's going to be phenomenal. So I really appreciate the panelists, who I'll introduce in a moment. But first, here's our agenda. We're going to do announcements, then we'll have our panel discussion on what makes for a great Sherlock Holmes villain, and then I'll open it up to the members here for the discussion, okay? All right, so a couple of announcements. I always call for announcements at the beginning. Our member, Thomas Burns, I don't think he could make it today. He did want us to know that he did a guest blog for the cozy blog, Chicks on the Case. He was a guest chick. And he talks a lot about his Natalie McMaster series, but he also talks a lot about his Sherlock Holmes work that he did in the Strand magazine and for Belanger Books and for MX Publishing. So if you get a chance to read it, it's a really good article. He did a nice job on it. All right. Okay, dynamics of a podcast. One of our own Madeline Quinones, who's going to be one of our panelists today, did a phenomenal panel discussion of her own during BSI weekend. For those of you who could not attend, she did her own little virtual, and she did one about Moriarty. And Dynamics of a Podcast is a pretty cool podcast because every episode is on our villainous professor there. I don't think there's any other Professor Moriarty podcast in existence, so it's really cool. And sometimes Madeline's by herself, and she talks for a good 45 minutes to an hour, and it's always really fascinating. So if you haven't checked it out yet, I highly recommend it. All right. Oops. All right. A couple of you already mentioned this, but the Legion of Zoom will have their first virtual conference on Sunday, February 20th. And I highly recommend this one for everyone. The speakers include Scott Monty, Barbara Roden, Bob Katz, Ray Betzner. I mean, some big Sherlock Holmes historians and speakers. I think it'll be a phenomenal conference. And then there's also going to be, for the first time, a premiere of a Sherlock Holmes radio play. And Steve Mason is going to be one of the characters in it, our own Steve Mason here. So highly recommend it. I'm looking forward to it. And I will send, as I always do, a follow-up email out to the group with some of these links, and I'll send the link out so you can sign up to attend, okay? All right. Also, just because you guys mentioned it, the Shingle of South Sea meeting, I didn't get a chance to put a picture up. Just when you guys were talking about it, I quickly added this slide. So if you get a chance, again, this will be on there, and you can go on to their monthly meeting and see that one. So it looked really cool. So thank you for sharing that. My own blog, I did a recap of the BSI weekend. So if you get a chance to check it out, lots of pictures from when Brian and I were there. We had a great time, and it's kind of like a little travelogue. So if you want to see it, go for it. It has a lot of our authors. We got pictures of both Shana and Rob signing at the Belanger Books table. It was really just, it was pretty much a magical weekend this year. It was just so nice to get back together in person. And I'm really looking forward to next year. Hopefully a lot of those restrictions that we currently have will be gone. So things are getting better. We've said that before, but I really think this time things are getting better. I also just wanted to throw this out because some of you guys are writers on here that the journal Steel True Blade Straight that Brian and I are putting together has officially been endorsed by the Arthur Conan Doyle Society. And we are looking for articles, poems, and essays on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, his life and his writings. Submission details I'll send out when I send our follow-up email out. But if you have something on Doyle or Sherlock Holmes, please consider submitting. I think it's going to be a great first issue. We have some great authors already lined up that are going to be submitting. So really looking forward to getting this journal and making it an annual will be pretty exciting. All right, so now we come to what everyone's really here for, the discussion. So this is the first time we've done this kind of a panel discussion for 5 miles, okay? And what we'll do is I've got a series of questions which I've already sent out to the panelists. And what we'll do is I will go through the questions and the panelists will get a chance to answer. And there's no real time limit. So if you talk a lot, it's okay. Okay, and if you don't talk a lot, that's fine too. And then when we come to the end of my 5 questions as I sent them, we'll open up the discussion to the group in case you want to ask the panelists questions or just want to participate, okay? All right, my friends. So here's our illustrious panel, and it really is a phenomenal panel here. Okay, Jayna Carter of Ash. Shana Carter was inducted as an adventuress of Sherlock Holmes in the fall of 2021. She chose Sarah Cushing as her investiture. Her first professional work of short fiction, A Box of Salt, a retelling of The Adventure of the Cardboard Box from Sarah's perspective, is in volume 2 of the Belanger Books Omnibus, The Nefarious Villains of Sherlock Holmes. She is a frequent panelist at 221 BCon in Atlanta and hopes to attend in person this year, conditions permitting, okay? Fingers crossed that you make it there, Shana, because I think things are looking good right now, so cool. Okay, Jay Ganguly, better known as Jay, well, she is Jay, is an Indian Sherlockian and a member of several Sherlockian societies, including the BSI. She edits the proceedings of the Pondicherry Lodge for the Sherlock Holmes Society of India and is the author of the Holmes Sutra and a Continuum of Sherlock Holmes. She's also in charge of the Fiction and Poetry Committee for the Arthur Conan Doyle Society. She does a phenomenal job with that. All right, Madeline Quinones from the John H. Watson Society is a Michigoose and a member and a regular contributor to the Society's Watsonian Weekly podcast for that John H. Watson Society. She runs a video podcast of her own, Dynamics of a Podcast, which is focused on Professor Moriarty. She writes fan fiction when the muse strikes and runs an irregular webcomic called The Adventure of Professor Moriarty. And she says, yes, and she has a brand. Madeline, when we get done, if you would shoot me a link to that webcomic, I'll send it out to the group as well, okay? That sounds cool. All right, and our last panelist here is Rob Nunn, and it is an honor to say Rob Nunn BSI, because this year he was inducted into the Baker Street Regulars and has the very appropriate name, Elementary. So Rob is a 5th grade teacher, which is why I say it's appropriate that he's elementary. In Edwardsville, Illinois, he has won the Beacon Award for exceptional educational experiences and other significant activities, exposing young people to the Sherlock Holmes stories. Last December, he released a collection of Sherlockian essays, The Commonplace Book, which I highly recommend, and is the co-editor of a new anthology celebrating Sherlockian collecting, The Finest Assorted Collection. In 2017, he wrote The Criminal Mastermind of Baker Street, a book that reimagined what the world would have been like if Sherlock Holmes had turned to a life of crime instead of detection. All right, so let's welcome our speakers. There we go, okay. So what I will do is I will ask a question And then I'll just call on the panelists. I will turn my view on to speaker view, so we would just see the speaker on the recording. I'm not sure if that works for you guys, but it does for the recording here. And then we'll kind of go through. Panelists, you ready?
Ready.
All right. Okay, so my first question is just with our topic for today. So what makes for a great Sherlock Holmes villain? Okay, and Shana, I'll have you lead us off.
Oh, all right. I thought that basically for me, it boils down to kind of what they do and how they do it, by which I mean the nature of the crime, whether it's particularly clever crime or just the sheer scale, and how they do it, sort of presentation or spectacle.
Okay, thank you, Shana. Rob, would you like to go next?
I think for me, what really rings true with the villains is the ones that they're going to accomplish their goal no matter what. And a lot of times those also happen to be the really intelligent criminals, but some of the kind of the weaker criminals, you look at somebody like James Ryder, like he just kind of thought it would be a good idea. He's not a good criminal, but you look at some of the other ones that they say, I am going to accomplish this crime or this collection of crimes no matter what, and everybody in my way will just get crushed. I think those are the ones that really rise to the top.
Right, thank you. Okay, Madeline.
Okay, I had a tough time with this question, actually, because there are a lot of different villains in the canon, and I don't know how well, a lot of the maybe more memorable ones really tie together, how similar they are. But I'm just gonna go with an especial sense of menace and a memorable name, which is why John Clay doesn't make the cut.
Not a terrifying name, huh?
No, names are important. I mean, like originally Sebastian Moran was Aloysius Moran. That just doesn't work.
All right, Jay.
Well, I would say that there are 4 things which make a great Sherlock Holmes villain. Brains, number 1, guts, power, and attitude. After all, we don't want our favorite detective to deal with like, useless, cowardly idiots, right? So a sense of satisfaction is what Sherlock Holmes looks for, and that can only be gained by solving a difficult problem. And a difficult problem means that the villain has to be worthwhile, right? So brains, guts, power, attitude.
Jay, I think you got your next article for your journal there. That was a good list. Okay, so here's one that I think a lot of you guys will be able to participate in a minute. So who are the top 3 Sherlock Holmes villains in your opinion, and what makes them stand out? Let's go reverse now. Let's start with Jay and work our way back.
Right. So Professor Moriarty, definitely number 1, right up there. I would also say Charles Augustus Milverton and Adelbert Gruner, the one from the illustrious client. Why do they stand out? Again, we'll go back to brains, guts, power, attitude.
I think we have our catchphrase for the day, huh? Nice. All right, Madeline, how about you? Who are your 3?
Well, I'm not going to surprise anybody by saying Professor Moriarty is my top one. But I think that he deserves it for being Holmes's dark mirror and causing his death. Like, even though it turns out that Holmes didn't die, it still kind of happens, mythologically speaking. And then also Baron Adelbert Gruner. He's a really nasty guy, and I feel like he gets overlooked because he's in the casebook, but he really shouldn't be. He's probably a serial rapist, definitely a serial killer with an obsession for women. So he's probably just about the evilest guy Holmes has ever actually met. And then I hate choosing between Charles Augustus Milverton and Grimsby Roylott, but I'm actually going to have to go with Roylott. He murdered his servant and his stepdaughter, almost murdered his other stepdaughter, and quite possibly was responsible for the death of his wife. And also, quite frankly, he has the best villain name out of everybody. I mean, Grimsby Roylott. So that's my list.
All right, Rob.
So I feel like we're probably going to hear the same names over and over again. But for me, in no particular order, Milverton is always he's just so focused on it. He just does not care about what happens to anybody that gets in his way or that he's trying to bleed dry. So I think that definitely puts him up there. Grimsby Roylott, when Holmes says somebody has the nerve and the knowledge to become, and I mean, Holmes really builds this guy up. So, and the scene of those two in Baker Street going toe to toe is just so delicious. And Baron Gruner, I don't know why. I think I heard some fan casting about this at some point when BBC Sherlock was in between seasons 2 or 3 or 3 and 4. Ever since I heard this, I got in my head after seeing David Tennant on
Oh my gosh.
Jessica Jones. I just thought what an amazing Gruner David Tennant would be, and that I've never been able to get that out of my head. So yeah, Baron Gruner's right up there too.
Okay, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, we are going to make this happen. We are going to.
Michael Sheen can be a Sherlock.
Oh my gosh.
I love.
Oh, I like this. well, a full cast here in a minute. This is great. All right, Shana, what you got for your 3?
All right, so my top 3, and these are just like, for me, the 3 that immediately popped into my head. Professor James Moriarty, the Napoleon of crime. And kind of dealing with like present, I mean, the fact that he's the head of this, presumably international criminal network, and then just the way he's described in the story, with the constant shaking of the head. I mean, that's the kind of detail that just sticks immediately and never leaves you. Second, Charles Augustus Milverton, again, partly because of the scale, the fact that he is, the master blackmailer. In fact, I tend to misremember the title of the story as the master blackmailer, which I think was the Granada episode title. But he's actually, I'm pretty sure he's the only criminal who is actually name checked in the title of the story. So there's a distinction there. And then also the way, again, that Holmes describes him, like comparing the sensation of dealing with Milverton to, looking at the snakes in the reptile house at the zoo. Again, a very vivid image. And then for my third, I did pick Dr. Grimsby Roylott, mostly for sheer entertainment value. This guy is a comic book villain. He shows up in Baker Street. He bends a poker with his bare hands. He's got this crazy menagerie, at his house. And then the murder method is just so bizarre and distinctive, So yeah, just very fun. And then it's kind of my, my extra. I did pick, Baron Adelbert Gruner is kind of my, my alternate, because again, as just pointed out, probable serial rapist, possible, serial killer. The fact that he's got this lust diary, and then just the detail that and he's also really into Chinese porcelain.
It's a great detail.
Yeah. That's our in porcelain.
Well, that's great. And I'm
I was just keeping a tally chart here. Interestingly enough, Gruner, Milverton, Moriarty, and Roylott all got 3 votes. So we couldn't come to a consensus on who was the best. We all.
Yeah, I know. I was keeping tabs as well, and I noted that as well. And also, I've been looking. If you haven't had a chance, the chat and people have been putting in their thoughts as well, and a lot of you here are agreeing with our panelists. I see a couple of other ones. Stapleton came up, Silver Blaze came up. Silver Blaze is a villain. That's an interesting one. I was surprised no one mentioned Culverton Smith, one of my personal favorite villains, but that's me. Okay, so next question, and this would be another fun one for you guys to participate in the chat before the discussion gets going here. Who is an overlooked Sherlock Holmes villain? Maybe that Silver Blaze would fall into that category, but Rob, why don't you start us off this time?
Coincidentally enough, I had 2 there. Culverton Smith was the overlooked. I think he's a great villain, but he just doesn't hold up to the other, like the big 4, I guess, is now how I'm going to view those. But his is more so revenge motivated, where if you look at the other 4 that we've talked about, they have a kind of a wide range of terror that they've inflicted. So, and for me, another one, and I know I'm probably going to get some hate mail on this one, but I feel like Hattie Durand is a pure villain in The Noble Bachelor, because she just makes so many decisions that influence other people negatively because it's what's easiest for her. Oh, I think my husband's dead. Okay, I'm gonna move. Oh, my dad says I shouldn't marry this guy. I'm gonna marry him anyway. Oh, I'm getting married, but oh wait, there's somebody else. I'm just gonna leave. And at no point does Hattie Durand take other people into account for her decisions. But she's not up there with Baron Gruner, but I think she gets way too much love from the Sherlockian fans. She's a pretty terrible person.
All right. Yeah. And I'm
Rob,
also,
what's your address? I need to send some hate mail.
Yeah.
I had, if you guys haven't been seeing the chat, I got to say, Robin put in the lion's mane jellyfish as an overlooked villain. I thought that was classic. All right, Jay, jump on in. Who are your overlooked villain or villains?
Well, I actually had 2 as well. One was the jellyfish, which Robin has already talked about. The second is James Ryder, and that's primarily because I really, really don't like him. He's not even worth being a villain. It's like, what kind of a nonsense villain is that?
Oh, that's good. All right, Shana.
All right, so those of you who listen to my introductory blurb are probably not going to be surprised that I picked James Jim Browner from The Cardboard Box, because he doesn't meet really any of the qualifications of the list I laid out. He's a good villain, and another way that he's a very plausible and believable and realistic villain. I mean, sadly, his crime, murdering his wife and her suspected lover because he thinks she's cheating on him, that's very, very common. And really, the only reason Holmes gets interested in this particular crime is because of the Grand Guignol detail that he cuts their ears off and mails them to the wrong sister. So he's kind of a villain for the Me Too era, I guess I would say.
Yeah.
And also, I also tend to think when it's overlooked, because I remember as a kid, the first time I read the story, it was like, okay, he's the killer, but it almost seems like the true villain of the piece is the sister-in-law who, by his account, drove him to it.
Good.
And obviously, my perspective has shifted.
All right, Madeline. We've got lots of animals in the chat, by the way, for villains.
So I mentioned John Clay earlier, and I think that he's an overlooked villain. And like I said, I think that's due to his extremely plebeian name, which is pretty funny because he is descended from royalty. And maybe, Granada did a little damage to his reputation by putting Moriarty at the back of the Red-Headed League. But Holmes calls him the fourth smartest man in London. And I mean, that's putting Clay on a level with Sherlock, Mycroft, and Moriarty. So I feel like that's a little, that's kind of a big deal. So I like it when I'd like to see a little more John Clay in fanfic and pastiche.
Excellent. Very, very good. Great choices. And enjoying seeing also the chat. We got the swamp adders in there. Lots of red leech, giant rat of Sumatra, which, I mean, doesn't even have a story, but okay.
Sorry, can I just chime in for a second? I want to say I actually considered John Clay for inclusion, because, great scheme, like, let's tunnel into the Bank of England. Although on reflection, I'm a little curious about the logistics. It's just like him and one other guy. Like, how are they planning to get the gold out? Even though it was like, the weekend before a bank holiday. I mean, he loses points for that. And also, as you say, John Clay is kind of a comparatively dull name compared to some of the Dickensian labels that most of the other villains get.
So you could say he's the common Clay. Thank you. You mentioned how are they planning to get the gold out of the vault, and the answer to that is very carefully.
All right, next question.
I think I have the answer to that, if I may, just in a few words. They left it in the tunnel and closed up the top so that it looked the way it looked before the robbery, and took it out little by little.
Oh,
Cool.
that
All
could
right.
You don't want to get it out all at once. It's too heavy.
Yeah.
Take it out little by little.
All right, next question. And this will tie in nicely because Olivia had put the question in the chat between antagonist and villain, but this will be a controversial one. Hopefully I don't get hate mail from you, Olivia, for asking it, but is Irene Adler a villain? All right, I will start with Jay on that one.
Absolutely not. She is the woman. How can she be a villain? Absolutely not. No way is she a villain.
How about Madeline?
To be honest, I've never understood the conflation with Irene and being a villain. To be a villain, I think you need two things. I think you need an intent to harm and a certain kind of rot in your heart. We get no evidence of either of these things in her. In The Scandal in Bohemia. We only have the king's word for it that she's blackmailing him in the first place. And I don't think that she is, because it makes no sense for her to. And quite frankly, even if she is, getting back at a powerful man isn't villainy, it's just being petty. And there's nothing to indicate that she is that level of petty. Mischievous, certainly, she does have a sense of mischief, but not petty. She's actually shown to be a very gracious lady in both of her interactions with Holmes in disguise. So, yeah, not remotely. Stop villainizing Irene, 20K22.
Yes. Yes. Oh, if I could list all of the ways that the modern adaptations have variously done Irene Adler dirty, we would be here all
That's
day.
another discussion.
Yeah, that's another discussion. That's another can of worms. I was going to say the real villain of A Scandal in Bohemia is the king. And isn't it mentioned, I think this is kind of overlooked, isn't it mentioned that the king killed somebody in a duel? Or am I thinking of a different character?
I think that's Granada.
No, I'm pretty sure. No, maybe. I sometimes get Granada and Canon mixed up.
I think that's a Granada line.
Okay.
Okay, let's get to the panelists just to let's see their opinions here. So Rob, what do you think?
No, absolutely. She is absolutely not a villain. I feel like there's three canonical characters that have been over conflated in the past century. And Irene is definitely at the top of that list. Rightly so. She is a very interesting and fun character, but she doesn't do anything wrong in this story and in her story. Now you can look at all of the things that have been used and done since then, and I think that's what creates popular culture's interpretation of her. But when you look at the source material, absolutely.
All right, and Shana.
Antagonist, yes. Villain, no. And like certainly at the start of the story, when we are, hearing the king's version of the situation, he is presenting her as a villain. It's almost like a revenge nude scenario where she's like, if you marry this, this princess, I'm going to send her this picture and you're going to be screwed. And then as, we get to know her, through Holmes's account of spending the day following her around, we kind of realize, oh, no, wait, we perhaps have been misled. And then, that wonderful ending letter that she leaves behind, where she gives her side of the story. Yeah, I cannot see her as a villain.
Before we go to the last question, I would like to point out that Irene Adler does meet Jay's requirements for a villain. She's got brains, guts, power, and attitude, just saying. Meet the definition, Jay.
Looks like Rich made an argument against Irene Adler in the chat. She did marry a lawyer, so that's a strike against her.
Larry, I think she's got a lot of power. She bested Holmes. You can't get more powerful than that.
She stood up to a king.
Yeah.
He's after her multiple times, and she still refused to buckle to his demands.
We always talk about this guy being the king of Bohemia. You all realize he doesn't have a throne? He doesn't.
Is it more of a folding chair?
No, it's more of a precarious position in life. He's the hereditary king of Bohemia, but the last ruler of Bohemia sat on the throne in 1740, and that was Maria Theresa. What he's looking to do by marrying this princess is to cement his relationship within the royal hierarchy. It will align him with Queen Victoria's family, and he's hoping that maybe she can put a little leverage on people to get his behind back in the chair where he feels he belongs. So that's what's on his little pink mind.
I like it.
I spent this morning writing all of that up because I needed to do a paper for the Speckled Band, and it's now off my desk. Yay.
The Speckled Band is off your desk?
No, they've got the snake up in Boston. I had to do the paper for them to get them off my neck.
Susan, let us know when that comes out. We'll announce it. When it comes out, let us know, and we'll announce it as for our announcements, our meeting after it comes out. Okay.
Oh, it's not going to come out. It's just it's one of the requirements for membership in the organization.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if I'm even going to get to read the thing, but I've done my part, and anything off my desk is a good thing this month.
All right, our last question for the panel, and our time, and we're looking good on time, so we'll have a little bit of time for questions afterwards. But the last question: has Sherlock Holmes ever crossed the line and become a villain? If so, where in the canon does this take place? Shana.
There are two possible occasions in which Holmes could be characterized as a villain. One, as we just discussed, in A Scandal Bohemia, but where he arguably is working for the wrong side. But I ultimately decide no, not strictly, because one, he doesn't actually take the photograph from Irene and deliver it to his client. And two, he is for me, the definition of evil or an evil act is deliberate and gratuitous harm. And I don't think what Holmes does in A Scandal in Bohemia quite qualifies. I mean, arguably the whole scenario where he, raises an alarm of fire, that does like some harm, but at least he doesn't actually set a fire. It is just a ruse, and he's quickly cleaned up. And again, he ultimately does not, just take the photograph from her. The other occasion, and here I would say things look much blacker against Holmes, is in Charles Augustus Milverton, when he trifles with the affection of Milverton's housemaid to the point where, he gets engaged. And that's really not cricket for me. Like that for me, I don't think that even though he is, working for, good ends, like I have a really hard time seeing that as a justified act. I mean, he says, oh, I have a suitor and I'm sure he'll step in. He can't be sure of that. I mean, he may have permanently dealt this poor woman, a lifelong, hurt. So
all I'm saying is, and I'm going to put my tinfoil deerstalker hat on for a second. All I'm saying is that Agatha told Holmes all of the information that he allegedly needed to know. And yet, on the night in question, where Milverton's supposed to be gone, Holmes and Watson are there, and Milverton shows up. Now, I'm not saying that Agatha Christie actually shot Milverton and tried to set up Holmes and Watson as her patsies, but that is absolutely what happened. Okay, tinfoil deerstalker off.
So do you think that woman never showed up at all and the guys just shot him to get him out of the way?
No, I think Agatha shot Charles Augustus Milverton.
I think Agatha shot him. I would have shot Holmes.
I mean, Holmes is usually a pretty good judge of character. So when it comes to like just reading the story, straightforward, I could definitely take him at his word that, oh, there's this other suitor and maybe Agatha doesn't really, it's not going to be a big deal. It's not a great thing to do, though. Definitely not a great thing to do.
No, it's creepy, but she was a servant, and servants don't really have any feelings. They're just there to
of
use,
course not.
In the Victorian era, that was what people who were reading those books believed.
Oh, absolutely.
They believed that was the truth. It didn't matter because she was a servant, and people did far worse things to servants. So just tricking her into an engagement when she had somebody else in the wings anyway was very minor compared to some of the things that happened to women servants.
And getting back to Irene for a minute, Holmes couldn't have taken the letter because that would have been outright theft.
Okay, Madeline.
Where
She never crossed into villainy.
Okay, yeah, sorry. So honestly, I was my answer is no. My qualifiers to that are the same as Shana's. With Scandal in Bohemia, he's at least, kind of in an antagonistic role. And what he does with Agatha in Charles Augustus Milverton is definitely not great. And I think it's not, I think it still doesn't exactly, I don't know, it's callous. That's the problem. He's not trying to hurt her, but he also definitely isn't really thinking this through. Otherwise, I mean, the funny thing is, of course he lets people who actually committed crimes go all the time, and he indulges in a little light crime on the side himself all the time. But Yeah, he's still always working for what he thinks is good, which technically villains can also do. But I think that usually he manages to come out on the side of good still. So I don't think he's a villain. Ever.
Okay, Rob.
I think what we're hearing here is a lot of gray area. There's a ton of times where Holmes does stuff that's morally ambiguous, and we look at it, and depending on what mood, at least for me, depending on what mood I'm in, I can think, oh, what a jerk move, or others like, okay, the ends justify the means. But what I think is interesting is in the two blackmail cases, Holmes can't operate in just black or white. There is no, you can't follow things to the letter of the law with the blackmailers. So yeah, the Milverton case is definitely, that'll be a debate that goes on for the end of time. Did he need to do what he did with Agatha? I don't know. So I'm not qualified to make that moral judgment, but I will say, I will take a hard line on Scandal in Bohemia. I really feel like Holmes crossed the line into villainy when he took the case from the King of Bohemia, because the King of Bohemia is, to my mind, is the villain of that case. Now he crossed back over into the heroic side by just kind of shooing him off and letting Irene Adler live her life without interference. But yeah, I think Scandal is the one where he really crosses into villainy, and that's just when he takes the case right up front.
Hey, Jay.
Well, I would say there are two people from whose points of view could be considered to have gone into villainy. One is definitely that poor maid Agatha in Charles Augustus Milverton. You do not make a false promise of marriage to somebody and just, blow it off like that. Went out of his way to seduce the girl, just to get into somebody's house and stuff. It's not honorable. It's not something that I would expect from Holmes. It's very, very disappointing. So that is definitely one. The second.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So the second person who has been at the receiving end of Holmes's villainy is, I would say, it's Dr. Watson. Number one, the man's best friend disappears for 3 years, leaves him hanging. It's like, yeah, I'm dead. The poor guy is mourning for 3 years and then just pops up. Nothing. I thought I would, many a times I picked up my pen to write a letter to you, but nothing. And that's really, really bad. The second one, again, Dr. Watson, the dying detective. Who does that? I am dying. Come help me. You are the only person. Blah, blah, blah. And then perfectly fine. I just needed to catch Culver Smith. What nonsense. Who treats their best friend like that?
I love the dying detective, but I can only imagine the fallout after
Yes.
the story.
Exactly.
So you're sleeping on the couch tonight. I'm never speaking to you again. Okay, we're cool. But it's just like, I feel like Holmes usually has his reasons and is justified. Usually when he gives the explanation, it's like, oh, okay, I can see why he did what he did. Well, I do think he can maybe occasionally cross the line into, I can usually go, okay, I can get what you were doing. It's like, yeah, maybe occasionally callous, but never cruel. And I do think that there's a difference. Now, I know, going back to Agatha, is it possible that somewhere in Holmes's brain, he thought that by, getting engaged and interacting with her, that he was actually sparing Agatha's feelings or her social standing? Because then he kind of makes himself look like the bad guy. So I realize this is a bit of a stretch, but it's kind of like, oh, now you're not gonna just be some, some floozy who's seen, hanging around with a man. and then this man went and just broke your heart by leaving. So in a weird way, you could have done it to like save her reputation and just be like, oh yeah, well the ascot was no good and you can go on to live your life. It probably made sense in his head, just like it makes sense in my head. I have a lot of feelings about Charles Augustus Milverton. It's one of my favorite stories, and I've spent way too much time thinking about it.
And we are now at the point where we can kind of open up the discussion to everyone. You guys have done a great job in the chat. One of my questions that just as you were talking, no one mentioned, Holmes was responsible for Dr. Roylott's death. And he didn't necessarily need to make the snake go back and kill him. He does say, he is responsible for the death, but he doesn't think it'll weigh on his conscience. So that was an area where I thought, did he cross a line there? But I'll open up to everybody. If anyone wants to ask questions of the panel or just kind of contribute to the discussion, just unmute yourself and we're good.
Yeah, in the case of Grimsby Roylott, I mean, he did not intend for the snake to turn on its owner. That was an unforeseen repercussion. He was just trying to get the snake out of the room for his and Watson's safety.
Yeah.
But for me, that does not meet the test of deliberate gratuitous harm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because, what's Roylott doing? Waiting for the snake to come back, Would you be looking up at the ventilator saying, here, snaky, snaky?
I think Roylott probably just had his face pressed right against that vent, just waiting.
Absolutely. That's how come it dropped on his head. He was just there saying, here's your milk, baby, come to Papa.
It was a magical snake, though. Let's not forget, this is a snake that can drink milk, doesn't need to breathe, and can hear. So you gotta give this snake credit.
Responds to a whistle.
No, a snake has plates that he can feel vibration. And he's got a little inner ear that you can't hear. But I think in some sects in India, if I'm right, a snake or a serpent conveys what's a household property. And what you do is put out little bowls of milk as an offering to him.
Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a festival around that. However, swamp adders do not exist in India.
This is true.
So next you're going to tell me that repulsive red leeches don't exist. Now you're going to tell me that.
I knew a redheaded guy called Leech that I could tell you about sometime, but you don't really want to know.
The one thing I would like to point out is as we sometimes get frustrated with the position that Holmes puts Watson in, think how many times Robin was hanging over a vat of acid thinking, Batman, why did you put me in this position? Or Artemus Gordon in the Wild Wild West, how many times his partner put him in a really, really bad position that he didn't need to be in. So I think that may be just something that crime fighters do with their partners, So.
I think every time Robin put on that yellow underwear, he should have said, Batman, why did you put me in this position?
Yeah. It kind of makes you wonder who the kid's tailor was, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines from the Star Kids Holy Musical Batman is, Batman should always be a solitary figure. The concept of a child crime fighter is ridiculous. It ruins the gritty realism of a man who fights crime just like a bat.
Yeah, I think once, the bat ears go on the cowl, you've lost the high ground.
Yep. But I do think that, like, with Watson standing in for an everyman, and because of the subsequent adaptation media, which took inspiration from Holmes and Watson, we sort of crossed the line from Holmes sometimes needing to do what he has to do, and then usually profusely apologizing to Watson afterwards and trying to make up for it best as he can, with who isn't it fun? Isn't it fun to like have your partner be dangled over a vat of acid? And I once again blame Nigel Bruce and some of the others earlier Watson adaptations for that, because you can't tell me they didn't influence some of those like early Batman Robin portrayals or other crime fighting partner duos. That is just my
But they did. I mean, Bob Kane's talked about how the Joker was based on the Moriarty in the Nigel Bruce and in those films. So yes. Ian, I thought you had your hand up for a second, but then you lowered it. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Holmes' behavior qualified him as a bounder or a cad, given that a Victorian gentleman's character was of serious import. For example, in bringing a woman to the edge of marriage for these nefarious purposes or not real purposes, and then dropping that, that would make him a cad, but Watson never remarks on that. So he's a cad, and that's not a good thing for a Victorian gentleman to be.
All right. Any other last comments? Because we are running close to the end of time. Larry.
Yeah, I always go back to, there are people that don't like certain interpretations of Sherlock Holmes. For example, some people don't like the Cumberbatch interpretation because it makes him too neurotic or whatever. And it's clear that Cumberbatch doesn't really know what it's like, how to be a good friend to Watson in the beginning, and Watson kind of has to show him how to do it. But that is something that comes from the Sherlock Holmes story. I think it's an aspect of Sherlock Holmes where he really doesn't know how to be a good friend to Watson. Watson's his only friend, maybe even his first one. And so, a lot of it if you think of him more like a Sheldon in The Big Bang Theory, he's smart, he wants to be liked, but he doesn't quite get some things about that kind of stuff. So that's just what and the other thing was the question about antagonist versus villain. That Irene Adler was perhaps the first antagonist that outwitted him, but not the villain that outwitted him, because he's not necessarily the bad guy in that story. Because the king, the guy with the power, is always the bad guy. Come on, the helpless woman can't be the bad guy. Come on, it doesn't make sense. It's like saying, anyway, that's all. Enough said about that.
Going back to the question of Holmes' treatment of Watson. On the one hand, you can ask the question, how can you treat a friend like that? Kind of the flip side of that is like, you can only pull that kind of shit with a friend. Like if you did this to a stranger, you'd be a sociopath. You do this with someone that you've lived with, someone who's been your confidant, someone who's been your oldest friend. There's more of an expectation that they know what they're in for, and they're more likely to forgive you because presumably you've got this shared history and the scale of reference. Where you'd be like, yeah, that's Holmes for you. What can I say?
It kind of reminds me of an old joke that I heard where you see somebody fall down into a puddle and just try to go, oh my gosh, are you okay? But if it's your best friend, you laugh at them,
yeah.
And then you go and help them go, oh my gosh, are you okay?
Yeah, sure, right.
And I'd like to point out that, again, when Holmes does, or does really cross or feel like he's crossed the line, like usually Watson does call him out on it, or again, that he usually does apologize, make up for them, be like, well, I'm not going to do that again, because Reichenbach notwithstanding, Holmes doesn't pull a dying detective-esque stunt anywhere else in the canon, and I can only assume that that's due to the no doubt dressing down tongue lashing that Watson gave him after the stories.
Well, he does drug him in, what is the one with the Tregennis family?
But Watson agrees to that.
That's of his own consent, his own free will, and Holmes also does the same thing, and it's Watson who ultimately winds up saving Holmes' life, and Holmes goes, it was an unjustifiable experiment, for myself doubly so, for a friend. I really am very sorry. So, yeah.
All right, everyone. We could probably go on for another hour, but I always try to keep the meetings to 1 hour, and we've reached the end. I want a round of applause for our panel. That was wonderful. So thank you, Shana, Jay, Rob, and Madeline. You are always welcome to return to 5 Miles. And next month, we have a very cool, different meeting. Steve Mason there. is going to give a presentation on his Sherlockian autograph collection. So Steve, we really look forward to it. Do you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. I'm really looking forward to that. That'll be cool. It'll be a different kind of meeting. And then probably in April, we'll do another canonical story. And then it looks like we have a presentation coming up in May that I'm close to lining up, and I'll let you know about that next month. But again, if anyone would like to be a guest host here, like present a story, whether it's one you've written or one from the canon, just send me a message, and I would love to have you on, okay? Thank you all, and greatly appreciate it. Oh, also, if you have a different topic you'd like to run by me for the group, please do that as well. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I look forward to seeing many of you at that conference in a week. So take care now.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, no.
All right.
Take care.
Fun. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Forget to send that info.
No schedule for afternoon. Lunch, send hate mail. Clean one. All right. Goodbye. This is such a lovely meeting. I'm so sorry I missed the last one. Work got in the
Fine,
way.
that happens, Olivia. Thank you so much for coming. You're always welcome. We appreciate it, okay? Thank you very much. Bye,
Yeah.
everyone. I'm gonna end it now.
Bye now.
Bye.